Hi, and welcome to episode 18 of Differential Diagnosis, the podcast where we differentially diagnose every single episode of House MD. This week, we're going to be taking a look at Season 1, Episode 19, called Kids. My name is Harvey. I'm one of your co-hosts. Hello from me. And then there's Gaz, who's the second one of your co-hosts, who will now say hello.
Hello.
Excellent.
Yep, always a pleasure to be here. We're actually face-to-face for once, which is quite a rare treat.
Fantastic. Yeah, we have a pretty rough construction, and podcast's only 3 days late this episode. So I believe you're getting a double whammy of this one and the latest DD extra, so enjoy that.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I didn't know I was being committed to so much work.
Absolutely. We're going straight to the next one after this.
Oh, yikes.
So, I think overall, Kids, it's an all right one. There's some, we're still kind of dealing with the fallout of Vogler. I'd say that's what Kids is. Kids is like the Vogler epilogue.
Yeah.
As we kind of like try and round off all the problems. So, I don't know if you have any interesting observations to start off with, or if you want to get straight into the synopsis and get cracking.
I'd just say the main driver is essentially it's a bookended episode. So at the beginning you have the Hameron and House meeting each other, and then it's Hameron and House meeting at the end, and then in the middle of it is this kind of more kind of, I think for House, a little bit more boilerplate episode. It's a strange one because it's actually the clinic case is actually the main case, and the main case, which is the meningitis, which he isn't actually investigating because there's nothing to investigate, is inverted, and that's the actual subordinate case, I think. I haven't really got a handle on what I think about that, but it's an interesting one in terms of Mary. You think that the moral of the story was going to be a bit more hard-hitting, in the sense of justice must be done, something must be done to rectify this heinous thing that's happened, and actually House just says, it's up to you, kid. And that was it was simultaneously refreshing but also a little bit galling.
Well, yeah, because the whole plot is, as Gaz says, the setup is that there's this meningitis case which feels like the big issue, but then House kind of spots a sort of much smaller, like, sort of anomaly out of that crowd while in the clinic, and then that kind of becomes the focus, even though there's this ridiculous event going on in the hospital where there's this meningitis outbreak. It's kind of like if maternity, when all the babies got ill, was kind of like the B plot.
Yeah.
And they went and did something else. So it is a very weird episode. You're right. It's very boilerplate, but it's got like an interesting setup, but it's very standard. And then at the end, obviously, it has this. I think the solution's quite simple. Actually, it's just like the girl is ill because of complications due to a pregnancy, which the team didn't assume because she's only 12. But then, yeah, I agree. There's this kind of like that feels like it should be more of a problem. And they do have a slight debate about that. But the girl's like, oh, it's fine. It's what I wanted to do. I'm mature enough to make decisions. And then they just abort it. And instead of, and then I guess the father is just some 16-year-old on the team, rather than it being the coach or something ridiculous, which I can kind of see might have been low-hanging fruit.
Well, we still don't know. That's the issue. We're never really told who did what to whom. And so there's a bit of tension because of that at the end. So you're like, who's done this? And it's also very daring in the sense that obviously abortion is a very big issue in the United States, and to take such not a position, but to portray a particular way of doing things on a politically controversial subject, that takes some balls.
Yeah, it's very casual, and House promotes it as it's pretty much the treatment.
Yeah, I mean, the way he describes it to the parents is just, what? Really? Very interesting. But, I mean, it doesn't come down pro or anti. It just deals with the realities of a very difficult decision. And House is, it just was very strange for House just to say, you're the boss. When in a lot of other cases, he's very much like, well, no, you're not the boss. I'm the boss.
Yeah.
I'm solving the issue. But in other ways, it's really consistent with who he is, because he is a man who's looking to cure illnesses. He's trying to solve puzzles. And once the puzzle is solved, it's kind of like hands off, right? I don't know. It's a really odd one.
Well, do you want to crack on with a synopsis and then we'll go into it? Although I feel we'll just be expanding on what we just did in the intro.
I agree. I think we might have just blew our wad very, very.
That's all right. Well, there's still a couple of drips left.
Oh, okay, then. So, as usual, the synopsis is powered by house.fandom.com, the preeminent source of information about the House MD television series. So here we go. Kids is a first season episode of House which first aired on May 3rd, 2005. House is drawn away from trying to get Hameron to return to Princeton-Plainsborough's teaching hospital when a meningitis epidemic overwhelms the Princeton area hospitals. When he comes across a 12-year-old diver with symptoms that don't quite fit meningitis, Cuddy figures he's just trying to get out of the boredom of screening dozens of people. However, when the diver gets worse, House finds the hospital's resources stretched to breaking point. And I wonder why that is. Sorry, that's not part of the synopsis.
It's more Vogler fallout.
Indeed.
So let's put the final nail in Vogler's coffin as we differentially diagnose Season 1, Episode 19, Kids.
Good old swim meet, where people are routinely humiliated due to their slowness and ineptitude at swimming, such as I did as a kid.
Well, I think this is one of those openings which, it's an interesting setting. Yeah. I'll tell you what, as it's the first season, any opening which isn't a family in a house and somebody just gets sick is fantastic to me.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, it's a bit of I don't know how you feel about the patient, because she's a child, right?
Yeah.
And she's probably the most interesting child that David Shaw managed to pull himself together to write. He was like, okay, well, I'll give this child some mild positive traits. I guess we found out that she's just like, she's driven.
Yeah, she's a very driven minor athlete.
But there isn't much more. We don't really see much more than that, right? Most of it is, I guess maybe she's a kid, they couldn't think what to do, but they kind of set up that she's driven. And then a lot of what's interesting is the way her treatment is handled, which is kind of a bit amateur, kind of a bit guerrilla style, because the hospital's in such a flux because of the meningitis scare, which I do like that the meningitis scare and the cold open of the patient are connected. It would have been weird if it was just a totally separate event. But then, she kind of is just like that. And then that kind of her being mature point is then brought to the end, kind of to then have a bit of debate about the whole that she's had sex and she's quite young. And but the show doesn't really go anywhere with it. It doesn't. I mean, it's one hell of a subject that I don't think anyone wants to juggle, like the nature of can children consent? Like, is it like a state of mind that you become mature, or should there be an age limit? It's a weird issue that the show kind of skirts, and it sets it up that they want the main character to be mature, and then they kind of like juggle it for like 2 seconds.
You're missing the biggest thing about this intro.
Oh, go on.
It's a red. You think she's gonna like completely like seize up in the pool, right?
Oh,
or
yeah,
something like that. But instead, she looks over. The judge is dead.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be her coach. I actually misremembered, and I was like, damn, the coach is going to be ill. But yeah, it's a huge red herring, the opening.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something I just wanted to bring up before we get into the kind of the moral meat of the subject of the episode. But yeah, that was like another red herring. They do that sometimes. They subvert the expectation. Go, oh, you caught me out there.
It has started cropping up more.
Yeah.
Because I was recently watching some people, I think it was on the House MD subreddit, they were having a, I think it was a drinking game article. Somebody was like, what's a good House MD drinking game? And one of the rules was every time like the person you think is going to be ill turns out not to be the ill one. And it's, but since we've been watching the show again, I hadn't really noticed it doing that much. So clearly that started happening more beyond this point. And I do remember it happening more, but it's very funny that those kind of, I don't know if they're bad habits, but habits nonetheless start to eke in a bit more.
Yeah, creep in. Like, whoa, didn't see that coming, did you? Like this, Hameron is greeted by House with a new cane.
Yeah, so this is part of the Vogler fallout.
Yes.
Which is that Hameron has still quit. But what becomes strange is that she is now allowed back, but she is refusing to come back, which I don't remember being so much of a problem from the last episode. There was she self-sacrificed and left in order to serve the team, and then there was this whole that she was kind of inspired that House did things because he's right, and I guess she leaves because she thinks it's the right thing to do. But then when House invites her back, she is extremely hostile about that. And she's even talking about that she's interviewing with another doctor. But yeah, I'm never sure how. I don't know. I feel like that kind of crops in the kind of gaps. And do you remember her being that hostile to the idea of coming back?
Well, I guess she's committed to it, right? And then all of a sudden he's going, "Oh, you can come back now."
Yeah.
And she's a little bit, I guess, apprehensive about coming back. And she made a whole kind of thing of saying, I'm doing the right thing. And coming back. And also there was the tension between the two of them. Which also, comes into it.
Well, should we talk about the Hameron and House relationship? Because I remember you were a bit less warm about the bookending structure, and then the deal that's struck.
The bookending structure I think is okay, but it kind of is weird because I don't really know what the true purpose of the plot is.
You mean Cameron's plot?
Yeah.
Oh.
Could they have put the bookend, but actually have raised the stakes enough that Hameron had to come back? And then there was a condition to do that, and then plot her back into Princeton on the condition that she wanted. It's like, look, I need you back. If we don't have you back, we can't do this.
Yeah, because the whole... Yeah, Cameron's kind of story, it's bookended that there is a scene where House initially goes to try and convince Hameron to come back. She's lukewarm to his wants. And then he comes back again. And... there are moments, even though there's a meningitis scare going on and Cuddy's really annoyed that House keeps going off to do something, she's also seemingly scheduled 3 interviews with different doctors. So it's throughout the episode, House kind of has these interviews with different doctors, and some of them are nervous, some of them are confident, some of them are pretty perfect for the job, but every time House finds a problem with them. And I don't know, I felt through that, at the very end, as you say, there wasn't really a stake. It was just that House wanted Hameron back. But a lot of his intentions are left unspoken. And it's what we talked about the show before, that a lot of things are left unsaid. Could could be seen as a failure to write motivation by some people. I quite like that the characters kind of are thinking things, or they're not making rational decisions. Like House could either realize that, you know, Cameron's a really great doctor. He seemingly makes lots of arbitrary criticisms of all the people he sees, even though they're perfect. And Wilson says they're perfect, so we kind of get an outside perspective on that. And yet he still wants Cameron back. So his reasoning could be that he has thought about it and Cameron's perfect. His reasoning could be that he's just obsessive and wants the same team. Like, he's not a person that likes change. And so I guess he'd be like, I need the same team back, even though somebody might be better than Cameron. So I'm never sure, like, that kind of, yeah, as you say, that kind of, really what it comes down to is that the reason Cameron comes back is because House wants Cameron to come back. But we never really get a definitive reason for that. It's not like, as you say, like, oh my God, Cameron's the only person for the job. It's just that House just seems to like Cameron the most for reasons that we never really find out.
Well, let's take a step back and try and infer it from the applicants that come through the door.
Yeah, go on.
And I think that might be the way to do it.
So there's number one.
Number one, he was just kind of really edgy, wanted to be irreverent. You know, he's a musician, but he's also a doctor. He's very kind of self-involved. And I think one of the big things to take from that, and also something that House says about him, is that you care what other people think. And if you care what other people think, then you'll change your opinions, you'll change your views to suit whatever is the prevailing opinion. You'll be a fair weather friend.
Yeah.
And is that something the House wants? I mean, if you look arguably at all of the cases that have occurred, does not want that. He does not want someone who's just going to change their mind because it's convenient, or it makes people feel good, or it makes people see them in a much more favourable light.
Yeah.
He wants people to say things when they don't work or not.
Which Cameron doesn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like Cameron's really stubborn in her beliefs.
Although you could say that early on, especially with some of the cases with the kids, which episode is that?
That's maternity.
She changes her opinion to try and make the problem less difficult for her, and House chastises her for doing so.
He does, which I guess she's already been through that lesson, so he doesn't want to teach someone else.
Yeah.
But also, I think Cameron's a bit different because she wasn't saying that to impress them. I think she would have been worried that that guy was trying to be liked. Like, Cameron doesn't do that to be liked. She's like scared of disappointing people.
Yeah.
It's a bit of like a different fear. She's not doing it to be cool. She's just terrible at facing fucking consequences, or any consequences for what she like has to do.
And what do you think about number two? She's got a lot of chutzpah. She's very in your face.
Yeah, number two is the confident woman, and it is I kind of find the second Doctor, because it's so back and forth. It's like someone says something and someone has an immediate like response. It kind of feels like a really badly directed like version of House. You know what I mean? Like, imagine if all the differential diagnosis scenes were that, because actually like the way people respond feels quite naturalistic, even though everyone's saying like insanely witty things. I feel like she is, I don't know if she's written as like almost too perfect. Like, that's kind of the joke.
Yeah. Is
that like she walks in and she has a response for House. She's like, I mean, she's good looking. We know that that's a criteria for House, apparently. You know, she wants to get the job done. She's intelligent, which is why Wilson's like, she's perfect. And then House blows her off because she's wearing uncomfortable shoes. And he thinks that shows that she's like, just wants to look good and is a bit shallow. But it's quite funny. It's like they go over the top and they make her like the ultimate Mary Sue of the character. Like, you know, if she replaced Cameron, she'd be awesome. And it's kind of funny to watch because it's so like overly done. And then obviously House then shoots it down, which obviously Wilson is like, you're insane. But yeah, I mean, I would hate for a character like that to be in the show. Like, she's way too snappy.
She's got a lot of chutzpah. So she's always she's upfront. She's in House's face. She gives as good as she gets, and is not afraid to tell House that.
Yeah, well, it very much feels like a character by committee. It's like if you were like if everyone sat down and was like, we want to make like the most like the perfect match to House, she'd be like the Moriarty, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it goes to such an extreme.
That's the thing. It goes to such an extreme. I thought it was really funny. It's just like totally over the top how competent she is.
But the interesting thing about it was he basically says, no, this is not good, because why is she wearing those shoes? She's wearing those shoes to impress. She wants to show she's powerful. But she's not a practical thinker. She's willing to be in large amounts of pain to look good.
Oh yeah, but that was like an arbitrary.
No, I don't think so. I've got a different interpretation of why that's the case.
Okay, go on.
But we'll get to that in a moment. And then there's Doctor Number 3.
Number 3 is just blown off so quickly.
Yeah.
I don't even think she really says anything. By then, House has kind of made his decision.
Yeah.
And this poor woman just sort of
Comes
sits there while he just totally ignores her. She seems competent, though.
Yeah.
She seems normal.
Yeah, she was normal.
I mean, you have to be insanely high functioning to be on a House's team. So, we don't really get a glimmer of anything from her. If she's normal, that's probably not a good sign.
But my main thing is that kind of Cameron replacement story, or B story. It's a parable, because it goes through the kind of general rhythm of there's an issue, there's one solution, dismissed. Why? Wisdom. Second solution, dismissed. Why? Wisdom. Third solution, dismissed. In this case, there is no wisdom involved, but usually there is. And then you get to the final person, and you find out that all of those factors were things that were not manifest in the person that you chose, and you followed the wisdom to the end. So it was really interesting. It's kind of like a mixture of a parable and a joke.
Yeah.
And with the second one, it was this... She just wasn't practical enough. It was all superficial, in a sense. She wanted to look good. She wanted to act the part. But she was willing to do that at the expense of what was practically true.
Yeah.
So that she would just go, let's do the flashy thing. Be like, hang on, but wait, we need to diagnose this more practically. And then it gets to that point. So as much as the other person would change his opinion to fit whatever the consensus was,
yeah,
the other person would be willing to try audacious maneuvers without actually doing the basics necessary to get to that point.
Fair enough. I read it as a much more House being stubborn and just coming up with bullshit excuses.
No.
But you put a little bit more thought into it than that.
Of course I have.
Right.
That's how I've read it.
But yeah. So I mean, well, whether or not House comes up with his logical reasoning for bringing back Hameron or his totally arbitrary one, do you know what, the only evidence I really have of that, my one big example, is in season 3, where House just causes terror in order to get the carpet replaced that he was shot on. I think that Hameron is basically that carpet.
You're thinking way too far ahead, and I don't think that's fair.
It's not fair at the moment, I agree.
Yeah.
So that's why I said I will not use that piece of evidence. It's the only piece of evidence I have.
But you did. You've spoiled you spoiled the punch already. You've already poisoned the well.
People have forgotten by then.
They think I'm wrong now. They think I'm completely irrelevant.
But he does go back to Hameron. He does convince her, and then we get that she'll only come back if he goes on a date with her, which I don't know, is a bit. I'm not sure how. It's very weird
Yeah.
because it's I think it leads on to a great like the episode where they actually go on the date, which is the next episode. But the build up to it is I know, like I'm in two minds. Like, it's one of those things where the setup is so awkward to get them on a date, but the date is so worth it that I'm not sure whether or not the awkward setup is good in hindsight. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because I really like the date. I like that then, like, and then kind of the Hameron relationship kind of falls apart after that date.
Yeah.
Because House makes a judgment, like what we'll go into it more next week, but whatever the motivations are, like, it's pretty obvious that they're not meant to be, and that Cameron might have had some probably strange deep-seated reasons for wanting to date House. But the setup is that she basically blackmails him to go on a date unless she'll take the job. I don't know, like I know that throughout the season, like, Cameron's been interested in House, that she finds him attractive, but for it to be like the entire reason she returns to the job is just for that one shot to date House. Like, they went on monster trucks.
Maybe she liked that so much.
I guess so. Or, like, didn't she take the hint then? Like, they didn't have a date then. It's it just feels like, I know, it's like, Cameron is so against coming back to the team, and then as you say, it's like there's no stakes. It just ends with, oh, can we go on a date? It's like I'm not disappointed. Like, I don't need the stakes to be insanely high, but it's a bit clumsy. It's a bit weird. It's like, I don't know. It's a bit awkward. I don't know how Cameron isn't, like, awkward saying that. Like, can you imagine saying that to someone?
Yeah.
And I only say that because the characters are like, they're relatively realistic. Like, Cameron, for instance, feels awkward about telling a couple that their baby's dead. There's quite a normal reaction. So does she not feel awkward in other circumstances? Because House buckles quite quickly, which I guess tells you something about House, that he, like, really wants Cameron back, which is an interesting thing to learn. And it's like, and throughout the series, actually, people do say, I think in the Vogler arc, Cameron was worried about being fired, and Chase is like, no, of course not. He loves you. He would never fire you. So there's this idea that, like, House has kind of a special place for Cameron as, like, one of his mentors, and then the kind of him accepting the date just to get her back in the office is like a nice cementation that there is more of a relationship there than with Foreman and Chase necessarily. But it's a bit clumsy. I thought it was a bit weird.
All right then. Yeah.
It's just a bit awkward more than anything.
But it's a necessary payoff. It's a necessary sacrifice of the plot for the payoff in the future.
Yeah, pretty much. I think. I don't know what your feelings are on it, whether or not they're the same, or you just love.
To be honest, I'm a bit.
You want Hameron to happen.
I think it's given way too much importance in the fandom, in my opinion. It's the wellspring of many torturous fantasies for many. And it's a bit overblown. But I don't know, it is clumsy. It doesn't make much sense. It seems way too left field, with not enough real build up, apart from some awkward encounters that they have at some points.
Yeah. She was literally staking being able to work on going back with House. It's not, I don't know. It could just be that maybe by that point she knew she held all the power, so she would have come back anyway, and she was like, oh, maybe I'll have a date as well. But it's, I find it clumsy.
Well, she better get a job quickly to get that apartment with the treadmill and everything in it.
Fantastic apartment. Maybe that's just what the early 2000s were like.
Yeah.
Very cheap.
Very beautiful. Very spacious. I wish I lived in a place like that with my treadmill. I think another thing we should touch on is that Chase gets a really hard time in this episode. Chase is given a real hard time in this episode. House has not forgiven Chase.
Well, I like that that's continuing. I like that there's continued Vogler fallout. The Vogler bomb has gone off.
$100 million bomb.
Well, yeah, I mean, even that's mentioned, like House. So the entire meningitis scare is there, and obviously House is like, well, I solve puzzles, I don't do the busy work. And then he even says to Cuddy, why didn't you hire all those nurses? And then she says, yeah, we would have with that $100 million. And then the next scene, obviously, he's in the clinic helping out because it's like he doesn't really have an argument.
Yeah.
He's now needs to. I guess it's kind of funny in the same way that the first episode he was making up for clinic hours. And he was like, oh, I've got to work till 2054 to make up my clinic hours. Now he needs to make up for $100 million. Like, it's like that hospital owns him.
Yeah. So Chase is basically told to look from A to Z for whatever the potential condition could be for Mary's meningitis-like symptoms, but they don't necessarily fit.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's the start of the episode. She just stands out from the crowd, and then House takes her, and pretty much the whole thing is at the hotel. The hospital is just totally falling apart. There's no beds, and it's just this. They're just trying to treat this patient while they're kind of being dragged back to deal with this other issue. But yeah, Chase throughout that is kind of ridden quite a lot, and it's I think this is pretty much the last episode where it happens. I think it happens for a few more, but it's nice to see that Chase is still being punished for his Vogler treachery. But while Chase is being punished, Foreman's getting mean. It's like while we were watching this, we noticed that there's a lot of instances of Foreman threatening people.
Yeah.
Because in this episode, he's because there's so much stuff going on, he's sort of having to compete for resources, and it's great. Like the first time he pushes into a queue and somebody says, "Oh,
there's a queue here."
Yeah, and Foreman says, "Yeah, that's why I said excuse me," and then he sort of tries to, kind of pressure the woman behind the desk to give him something.
And then he also gets pushed by one of the dogs. Says, "Don't push me again."
Yeah, well, doesn't he say?
Push me again.
Oh yeah, he says push me again, see what happens.
to that effect, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's really funny. There's like several scenes of Foreman like getting pretty threatening with people, and I quite like that. I think that makes Foreman stand out a bit more. That he's it makes Foreman stand out from all the other doctors, like because we know that he's had a pretty rough background, and it's nice that under pressure, like he's not just it kind of gives him a bit more of an edge that he's not just like a guy who sort of has an answer and he's confident. He's like, do you want to take this outside? But in like the most professional way possible. Like, he's really confrontational. He could clearly beat up most of the people in the house.
He's got very sharp elbows. That's what I would say. Don't mess with him. Push me again.
Yeah. It's a really minor thing, but it's kind of like, I guess it's nice in this episode that the team kind of has something going on at least. Like Chase is the one who's sort of like doing all the tests. He's being ridden.
He's in house purgatory.
He's in house purgatory. Foreman is just walking around. Foreman's like, because Chase is actually mostly not with the patient for the most part. Like Foreman's the one conducting, like, the bone marrow, like doing the bone marrow thing, doing the LP, like trying to get her a bed. Foreman's kind of the heavy. He's walking around. He's like threatening people in a subtle way. And then, Cameron's sitting at home, like plotting her way to trick House into a date. So everyone's got some stuff to do. And then Wilson's like around House a lot. He's trying to like sort out the Cameron situation. I think Wilson starts to have a lot more personality in this episode. Not that he hasn't before, but he's definitely this kind of. He seems a lot more matey with House. He seems a lot more like questioning of House's decisions. He's a lot more of that really like charming, like emotion, like more moral consciousness side.
Well, that, and he did say, "That's our Hitler."
Yeah, exactly. He's got a bit more of an edge to him. He's not like the nice man who tries to get his fake cousin into the hospital.
A bit of pushback.
Yeah.
Look, come on, stop being unreasonable. Get on with life. Got stuff to do.
Yeah, and that's what Wilson is, and I like that it's starting to come out a bit more.
Yeah,
it's he's not so much being carried by just Robert Sean Leonard being a charismatic guy. I feel like Wilson starts to come out a bit more. It's got a bit more of an edge, as you say.
Would you say this is the first real sense that this comes out? You keep a close eye on Wilson, I know.
I'm very skeptical. I think, I don't know, it's the first time I'm talking about it.
Yeah.
But it might also be that this episode's quite bare bones. We've run out of things to talk about. But yeah, I think overall, it's I don't know. Do you want to surmise what we've been thinking, or do a big summation?
I don't think there's much to summarise in the sense of I think the main thing we need to tackle is the end of the patient story, which is as I tried to marathon through in the intro. Yeah, do you want to give your opinion on that? Because I don't think there's much to discuss with the patient. I think it's one of those episodes that has a really cool setup, but there's not much to discuss. The entire hospital is in chaos. They have to treat the patient in kind of a guerrilla style, like, they can't find her a bed, so they have to treat her in the morgue, that kind of thing. It's interesting, but it just shows that the writers trying to mix things up, keep things interesting each week, not make it feel like, it's just a person sitting in a bed and the team arguing about what's wrong with them. Yeah.
They're keeping it fresh, which is great. But in terms of actual, character development of the, patient, there's not much going on there. It's just solid. It's very boilerplate. But sorry, guys, go on with your analysis.
It kind of corresponds with a few things that we've said before. The first being that House has a Rubik's complex, not a Messiah complex. He doesn't want to... It accords with that kind of theory, because as soon as the disease has been solved, or the patient case has been solved, which is, in essence, she's pregnant and there are loads of complications and they weren't really foreseen because no one was really entertaining the thought that Mary would be pregnant, it's ended. And as soon as that you'd think where the disease ends, the moral dilemma begins. She's underage, she's very young, she's pregnant, parents are here. What happens? How does House deal with this? And then all of a sudden you're reminded, he solved the puzzle. The moral side is important, but really that's up to the patient in this case. He can't change what the patient wants to do per se, although we've seen in episodes he does try to convince people that is not beyond him. But in this, it just seems more like the Rubik's Cube complex comes out rather than the Messiah. That's revisited as a theme of House's motivations. Yeah, according to law, you're the boss. I don't have to tell them anything. I can couch it in very strange terms, and the political situation in the United States about this subject, it's very cold. It takes no prisoners with the dialogue. It says, it's like an abnormal growth in the abdomen.
Yeah, and it's the episode then matches that, because we don't then see the parents reacting or being told. It literally just scraps them and goes, we'll never hear from them again.
No, it does, because you see after the abortion, Mary asks for her parents to come in, and there's a far back shot of her talking to them from the bed.
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry, yeah, I think Chase is watching her, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. It's
I was expecting, in my art of arts, that they would have to deal with that issue of both the possible statutory rape, the underage pregnancy, and the abortion element. The trifecta of kind of very controversial things.
Yeah.
And it just goes, it's the patient's problem.
Yeah. But it fits the theme, at least. It could be them trying to rush and finish the episode, but because of kind of House's setup of that he only cares about the puzzle, it's there, she's going to have the abortion. He's like, whatever.
From a series art perspective, it's not consistent. Because we've talked the whole Rubik's Cube complex thing.
Yeah, and how he is more invested in the patients than he lets on a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, as you say, it's not that consistent in the whole, but like in terms of House as like his basic bullet points, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not like you watch it and go, oh my God, that's crazy. It's like, oh, that's maybe a bit quicker at resolving that than it would be otherwise.
Yeah.
So overall, it's an interesting setup with nice bit of extra stuff.
Yeah.
The team has something to do. Wilson is looking lovely, and it's got a moral conundrum at the end that it sort of just sweeps under the rug.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Basically, that's what happens. And it's also interesting that the A plot isn't really the A plot, and the B plot is really the A plot.
Yeah, it's
Hameron is the A plot. It's just hidden in this other stuff, which is interesting, but it kind of gets overshadowed by the Vogler fallout.
Yeah, I think this is very much it's an epilogue episode.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah, an epilogue episode.
Which is nonetheless satisfying because it's cleaning stuff up and you get a lot of resolution, but at the same time, it's all the same. It's an epilogue.
Yeah, I agree.
So, well, thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Differential Diagnosis. As always, I say as always, from now, we'll also be with you on Thursday with a little added extra. So check in if you want to hear us ramble about some other completely different part of the show. This week's episode of DD Extra is going to be about the fandom and some fan fiction stories which we found, which we thought would just be entertaining to talk about, but it would be a very casual, laid back one, so you're not missing anything if you then want to wait till Monday, where we'll be talking about season 1, episode 20, Love Hurts, getting ever closer to the end of season 1. But thanks for listening, and it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
See you next week.